You are listening to the Becoming the Wealthy You podcast with Jermaine Foley. If you're a woman who makes good money in your career or business, but you're not building wealth like you want to, then you're in the right place. In this podcast, you'll learn how to stop overspending, break free from the cycle of debt, save lots of cash, and become the wealthy woman you were born to be. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are talking about values-based spending, which is the second pillar in my do both method. Now, before we dive in, I have to tell you a quick story. I was recently on a flight watching a new movie that just came out this year called The Materialist. The main character was actually the woman who was on 50 Shades of Grey, the main character. I don't know her name, but in this movie, she was a high-end matchmaker for successful people looking for equally successful partners. So at one point, she was at a wedding that she had helped match, the bride and the groom. And all of the women, she was helping them, giving them tips and strategies, and they were just eating it up. And the groom's brother was eyeing her, and then, he ended up sitting next to her at dinner, and he said something that really, really stuck out to me. He said, "You never tell people they need you. You let them know that they could do it on their own, but if they have the means to afford you, why wouldn't they hire you?" And it hit me. That's exactly how I feel about financial coaching. You, my friend, you listening to me on the other end of this microphone, you can absolutely do this on your own. You're smart, you're capable, and you're resourceful. But it's kind of like what he said. Why would you go at it alone if you don't have to? If you have the means, if you have the resources to be able to invest in yourself, why wouldn't you? It's kind of like coloring your own hair. Sure, you can do it at home, and it might even look good for a little while, but the results will fade. The color will dull, and it never quite matches your undertone or the season that we're in, right? If it's fall, it might not look good for fall. If it's summer, it may not quite match summer. What's interesting is that you just don't have someone mixing the exact formula for you. A professional hairstylist that could help you get it right and make it last as long as possible. Coaching is the exact same way, you all. You can DIY your finances, and you might even make some progress for a while. Some of you can definitely DIY, and you're DIYing it. You listen to this podcast every single week, and you literally apply everything I say. But there's another group of you who are trying to DIY, and you take 2 steps forward and then 5 steps backwards, right? You are trying to do it on your own, but it's not sticking. Maybe you've done a no spend challenge and celebrated by overspending the next month. Maybe you've paid off your credit cards only to run them right back up again. Maybe you've saved a few thousand when you got a bonus only to spend it down, right? Hear me again. I'm going to keep saying it. DIY can work because it's what I did. But it took me 15 years to figure out how to make it stick. Yeah, I saved. I got out of debt. I stopped overspending. I went back and forth. I would save, and then I would spend. I would get out of debt, and then I would go back into debt. I would not spend, then I would go on a spending spree. But it took me trial and error to figure out, okay, it's not just about money. It's not just about budgeting. It's not just about scrimping and saving and cutting back and slashing expenses. It's about what is happening in my mind. It is about the psychology of money more than anything else. So it took me 15 years to not only figure it out, but learn how to actually make it stick, where I wasn't going back and forth, where I would pay it off and then run it back up again, where I would save and then spend it out, where I would not spend and then go on a spending spree, right? You all know what I mean, because I'm sure you're living this. So if you don't want to wait years because it's already been decades, right? You feel like you should just be so much further along and you've tried on your own. And yeah, you make progress, but it doesn't last. And you want support, you want accountability, you want guidance, you want a proven roadmap, then you, my friend, are invited to book a wealth building strategy consultation with me. Every month, I open up a few spots for new clients. And if you would like one of those spots, all you have to do is go to jermainefoley.com/consult to book a consultation with me. We'll look at where you are financially, where you want to go, and then what's the gap? How can we bridge that gap? That is what that call is all about. And if we feel like it's a good fit to work together, I will tell you what that will look like. Again, all you have to do is go to jermainefoley.com/consult, because at the end of the day, you don't need me. But if you have the resources, even if you don't feel like you have them on paper, right? You may need to reallocate some things. You may need to reallocate your overspending to investing in yourself so that you can learn how to manage money. That is something no one can ever take away from you. Once you get it, once it becomes your habit, then it's just who you are. If you're ready for that, why continue to go at it alone when you can have support, when you can have guidance, when you can have someone holding your hand the entire time to help you make lasting change? And here's the next thing I'll say before we get into the episode. I was talking to a client and she was just like, Jermaine, I tell my friends about you all the time, but some of them are just like embarrassed. They're like, I'm 40 years old and I still haven't figured this money thing out. I'm just too embarrassed to talk to somebody about it. Listen, shame and embarrassment, those two emotions make you hide. And when you're hiding, you're not getting the help that you actually could be getting. And so even if you feel nervous, even if you feel a little embarrassed, even if you feel a little ashamed, listen, my money was a hot mess. There's nothing you can tell me that will make me look at you like, oh my gosh. Because guess what? I was the worst. I was literally the worst. Go back to episode number 2, my not so pretty money story. If you've never listened to that, listen to my money story and you will see that I was the worst. Nobody has come through my coaching program who was worse than I was. And so this is a no judgment zone. This is a I'm going to change zone. This is a I'm going to figure this out zone, okay? So if nervousness, shame, a little bit of embarrassment has been holding you back, I want to invite you to not let that keep you stuck in your comfort zone. And if you need some assistance, go to episode number 2 and listen to my story and know that I was the worst and you cannot top me, I promise. So today we're talking all about values-based spending, which means that you spend on what truly matters to you and you stop spending on what doesn't. And when you do this, you free up money to be able to build wealth with. I believe that this is the missing key for those of you who are making good money. When I say good money, I mean 6 figures, close to it, or multiple 6 figures. If that's you, but you're not building wealth, values-based spending is something that you really want to start embracing. So most of the women that I coach are not careless with money. Most of them actually are pretty good with money. They don't believe it, but I do, because they're taking care of their families, they're spending on what truly matters to them, and they're taking care of necessities. But here's the issue. They're also spending on any and everything else. Their money is literally going everywhere without intention. They're saying yes to everything, and so they feel stretched. No matter how much money they make, they feel stretched and like they should be further along and that they can just never get ahead. Most people think that this is going on because they lack discipline, but discipline is not the issue. Instead, it has everything to do with the fact that their money literally is just going everywhere. It has no clear intention or direction. And that is what keeps so many of you stuck in the credit card debt cycle with mediocre savings and that constant feeling of I should be further along by now. So if you're just tuning in to this series, maybe you've missed the first 2 parts of the series, I want you to know that this is episode number 3 in our Do Both Method series. I'm recording this series because I really want you to know that do both, which is something that I say often. I say that you can do both. You can build wealth and enjoy life at the same time. I want you to know that that is just not a tagline. It is actually an entire system and a framework that I've created and one that I take my private coaching clients through. And so I wanted to give you an overview of it so that you can see what you'll work on with me if you decide to be a private client as well. So as a reminder, in episode 146, we looked at the full framework from a 10,000-foot view. Okay, I gave you an overview of the entire framework, and I talked about what the purpose of the framework is. It's not just so that you can save and get out of debt and invest. It is so that you can feel financially secure. And we use the acronym SAFE, SAFE. Again, you can go back to episode number 146 so that you can hear the full overview. And then in the last episode, we talked about vision, which is the first pillar of the Do Both method. So let me go ahead and just give you an overview of the entire framework one more time. So the first pillar is vision. The second pillar is values-based spending, and that is what we're talking about today. Next week, we're going to cover emotional money management. If you are an overspender, an emotional spender, an impulse spender, you definitely do not want to miss episode number 149, which will be coming out next week. The fourth pillar is mastering the 5 core areas of money. And the fifth pillar is having a simple money management system that works automatically in the background so you're not using willpower to make decisions with your money all the time. And the final invisible element is identity. Once you start practicing this framework, you will begin to change. You will become someone different. You'll identify, you'll think of yourself as someone different. And then once that starts to happen, this is how you make it all stick. So let's go ahead and dive into today's pillar again, which is values-based spending. So values-based spending is literally a financial strategy that aligns your spending, your personal values, and your financial goals rather than just focusing on strict budgeting or deprivation. So instead of just cutting costs, slashing expenses, it really does encourage you to intentionally think about what's important to you, spend money on those things, and again, to stop spending on things that do not matter to you, whether that's travel, health, or self-development, whatever it is for you. There's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. Everyone is different, but you do need to figure out what it means for you to enjoy life. You need to figure out what actually matters to you. And then you want to spend on those things and just be relentless and cutting out spending on things that actually don't matter to you. When you embrace this type of spending, it really does help you reduce financial stress because your money starts to reflect what truly matters to you. And when that happens, your spending becomes purposeful. You're not beating yourself up because, yes, you're spending on things that matter, but you're also taking care of your necessities and you're building wealth. Okay? So values-based spending is about spending on what matters to you, taking care of your necessities, and prioritizing your financial goals and making sure you actually have financial goals. So you're not just taking care of necessities and spending the rest on what matters to you. You're doing all three: necessities, spending on what matters, building wealth. You're prioritizing all three. Now, before we dive into an overview of how values-based spending works, I want to address something that's super important. Spending is personal. Most people forget that. I see a lot of judging people based on how they choose to spend their money. So you might see someone who buys red bottoms, $500, $600, $700 shoes, maybe a nice handbag that costs thousands of dollars, or they might drive a luxury car. And then you can actually find yourself judging them sometimes. Like, I could never spend that much money. But what you don't see is that that person could be debt-free, maxing out her 401k and other retirement, and has tens of thousands of dollars in a high-yield savings account. She's on track to retire early, and she's got plenty of disposable income because she also does well with her income. Meanwhile, there could be someone who seems frugal on the outside because they buy discount shoes, or they clip coupons, but you don't know what their money is like, right? They could be carrying $20,000 in credit card debt and living check to check with no savings. And you could think that they're responsible with money because they're not spending it on things that you deem as frivolous. The difference here isn't the price tag, you all. It is intention. One person has prioritized her appearance. Some of my clients, when they come to me, they're like, Jermaine, my appearance is a top value that I have, and I want to look good. And so we spend money on them looking good because that is important to them. That is not something that we should be judging, right? We should not judge people for what they value because we're all different and we all value different things. And then I could have someone that'll be like, I could care less as long as I'm presentable. I'm not spending a lot of money on clothing, but I love, love, love to travel and I like experiences. And so their money goes that way, right? And depending on how much you make, you might be funding quite a few values at the same time. But if you're making less or if you had a lot of credit card debt to clean up or very little savings, it just depends on what season of life you're in with your finances. You may be prioritizing one value over the other, okay? So let's not judge others, but even more importantly, don't judge yourself for the things that you value. Don't beat yourself up or tell yourself that you're being frivolous because you want a nice handbag. Please don't do that to yourself. If you desire to drive a luxury car, let's make it happen. We don't need to beat ourselves up because of that. And you are no better or worse than anyone who chooses differently. Okay, so before we dive into what it means and how it works around value-based spending, I really want to make that clear that we're not judging. Because listen, I like a lot of nice things. I am a person who values nice things. And that doesn't make me worse or better than anyone else, no matter what they value. So again, the price tag isn't the issue, it's the intention. Going back to my example, one woman is practicing values-based spending, right? She's maxing out her investments. She's got savings. She isn't carrying credit card debt, but she does spend on expensive things, right? The other person is practicing what I call death by 1,000 cuts spending, right? A few dollars here, a quick Target run there, an Amazon splurge here. It all adds up. And sometimes up to thousands of dollars each month that are just being wasted, that are just literally flying out the window with no value being added to your life. It's so funny because recently I was speaking to someone who listens to the podcast and she was like, Jermaine, I always laugh because you talk about how the average person overspends $300 and some dollars every month. And she's like, oh my gosh, I can do that in a day. And so some of us are overspending thousands of dollars a month on things that we just can't even remember, things that really don't matter to us. And we could be reallocating those things to values, things that we actually value, and then also to our wealth building. Okay. And so remember, it's not about how much you spend, it's the why behind your spending. And next week, we're going to actually go deeper into that because that's when we're going to talk about pillar number 3, emotional money management. So learning how to incorporate values-based spending into your life is not something I can teach you in just a few minutes during this episode. This is something that takes practice, and it's something that I hold my clients' hands through as they learn this new way of spending. But what I can do for you all today is give you a high-level look of the components. So the first component is to identify your values. Many of us are walking around and we don't really know what's important to us. And that's nothing to be ashamed about because most people are not in tune to what they really want. They're not in tune with what really matters to them. They're not in tune with what gives them purpose, what gives them fulfillment, and what brings them joy. And so this is why one of the first things I do with my clients when we're working together is I take them through an exercise that really helps them to identify their values. And this is where we just determine what's important to you. For some of them, it's financial security, freedom, family, travel, appearance, faith, growth, health. It's just, there's so many things that you can value. But what I do is I help them narrow it down to the top 3 to 5. The second thing we do is you want to analyze your spending. So now that you know what's important to you, you want to look at your spending and say, okay, is my spending aligned with what I now know is important to me? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes and no. Yes, because if things like travel, experiences, health, if those things are important, usually you are funding those. But here's what I always see. Financial security is always on the list as one of their top values. Sometimes it's number 1. And it's also always one that is underfunded before people start working with me. It is always on the list as the one thing that is underfunded, which means they're not putting a significant amount of money towards building up their financial security. So that's why number 2 is to analyze your expenses, not to beat yourself up, not to say you shouldn't be spending this way. It is just to look and say, okay, these are the things that are important to me. This is how I have been spending my money in the past. Is there a correlation? And like I said, it's usually yes and no. Number 3 is to make adjustments. So once you see that, oh my gosh, I value these things and I'm spending on some of them, but not all of them, or I might even be overspending on some of them and nothing is being allocated to other values. Based on the season of my life that I'm in, I want to adjust. I want to see what's going on and adjust based on the season of life I'm in, how I want to prioritize the values that I have, and where I am financially. Because at the end of the day, right, you could have 5 things that you value, but you do need to prioritize them. And based on where you are, you may need to say, okay, I'm going to prioritize my financial security over my adventure right now. Maybe, right? You just never know. And I help my clients figure that out. It could be based on a lot of things, right? It's not cookie cutter. And sometimes I'm like, okay, we need to put more money towards your adventure because if this is completely underfunded, you're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to sustain the plan. So everyone's different. Every situation is different. But this is, again, a nice overview of what it means to be someone who is a values-based spender. So now let's look at the final component here, and that is to spend mindfully, right? So in order for it all to work, you have to actually do it, right? You have the plan, you know your values, you've analyzed your spending, you've made adjustments, and now it's time to actually follow through. So that's step number 4. Because once your needs are met, your financial goals are funded, and you're enjoying your money, that is when all the guilt and the shame and the beating yourself up stops, because you can breathe knowing, wow, I'm spending my money in a very thoughtful and responsible way. I'm taking care of my necessities. I'm building wealth. That can mean that you're paying down debt, you're saving, you're investing, and you're allocating money so that you can live a joyful, fulfilling life. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all really desire in the first place. Recently, I was working with a client, helping her to identify her values, and she figured out that her top values were family, travel, health, growth, and, of course, financial security. When I asked her the question, are any of these underfunded? And here's what she had to say. A month ago, I would have said financial security is definitely underfunded. But now that I'm investing in myself to work with you, I can't say that anymore. Not only am I investing to learn how to handle my money, to stop overspending, to get out of debt and stay out, to save, and to stop emotional spending, but I'm actually doing those things. I'm not just learning how to do them, I'm actually doing them. She had saved $4,000 just in the first month. Nope, she didn't get a bonus or a windfall. She did not get a new job or start a new income stream. That was just from us sitting down and doing exactly what I just walked you through, making decisions and choices based on what was valuable in the moment. Sometimes we think some things are valuable, but when we really reflect, we're like, instead of spending on that, I'd rather put that money here. And those were some of the decisions that she made that allowed her to come up with that money that fast. And again, these are things that you don't necessarily see when you're trying to do it on your own. That is the beauty of having a coach, someone who's been there, done that, someone who has a proven roadmap and proven systems and tools and concepts to help you navigate these types of decisions, right? And so that's what happens when your money aligns with your values. You build both financial security and freedom. And she's like, oh my God, I've never had this much money in savings. And of course, I had her put it in a high yield savings account. And I just want you to know that that's possible, right? I was talking to another client and we reflected on her progress, and she had already paid off $11,000 in debt, all because of these tools that I'm sharing with you right here, all because of the do both method. If they can do it, you all, so can you. And so again, I'm going to invite you to book your wealth building strategy consultation. Again, it's complimentary. All you have to do is go to jermainefoley.com/consult to book yours. I take on a few new clients every single month. So if you want one, let's do it. Why wait? Remember back to my materialist example, the movie, like you could do this on your own, but if you have the means, if you have the resources, which you do, if you're making six figures or close to it or multiple six figures, you have enough money to invest in yourself. You just have to be willing to do it. Yeah, you may need to stop overspending for a little bit. Like the one person said earlier from listening to my show, she was like, $300, I can do that in a day, not a month. So maybe you just need to do that. Reallocate your overspending dollars to something that could literally change your life. And so that is what I'm offering you today. Again, all you have to do is go to jermainefoley.com/consult. And so here's how I would love to close out this episode. I want you to take a moment and reflect. I want you to ask yourself these two questions. Where is my money going right now that doesn't reflect what truly matters to me? Where am I spending my money on things that actually do not matter to me? Some of you are getting packages delivered to your door and you don't even have the energy to open them. You don't even know what's in them. The second question is, what would it look like to fund your financial security with the same excitement that you fund travel or appearance or self-care? What if you felt just as enthusiastic about investing in yourself to learn how to handle money, not just this year, not just this month, but every year moving forward, every month moving forward? Like, what would change if you were that enthusiastic about investing in your financial security as you are in booking trips? What would change? I would say everything would change. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye. Hey, if money is the one area of life you just can't seem to figure out, even though you make good money, you're not alone. That's why you're invited to book a complimentary one-to-one money consultation with me so that we can figure out how to solve your biggest money challenges. To sign up, simply go to jermainefoley.com/consult or check out the show notes. Hope to meet you soon.